Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another series review. And today's series review is another one I've been thinking about for a very long time, and that is Loki of Glorious Purpose. Yes, it is about time we get into the Loki series. So, what is the Loki series about? Well, it splits off after the events of the Avengers movie, in which essentially Loki diverges on his path from the sacred timeline. The original events follow him supposedly dying, and then dying again, and then essentially pretty much being defeated by Thanos. However, there is an alternate Loki, a variant Loki, so to speak. And this variant Loki gets taken out of time whilst his other version of himself plays out the events the way we see it in the movies. This Loki is put on trial for a crime he believes he did not commit. He is locked away and incarcerated until his trial, until he can be put through the justice system of the TVA. Now, the TVA, for anyone who's not familiar with this series, is the Time Variance Authority. All set up by He Who Remains. Who is He Who Remains, you may be asking? Well, none other than Kang the Conqueror. But that we'll get into in a little while as we get further down the story. So essentially, to try and get himself pardoned, Loki agrees to track down one of his variants in hope that the TVA will keep to their promise. However, after realising and tracking down the fugitive, that the TVA has no intentions of setting him free, he tries to help his variant escape. But of course, they both end up putting each other at knife edge, and he meets his female variant named Sylvie. Or as she is known to many comic book fans, the Enchantress. Now, the Enchantress doesn't want anything to do with Loki. She doesn't even consider herself a Loki. Instead, she considers herself carefree, living in apocalypses because it's fun. While stranded on a moon, her and Loki are forced to work together as he sticks the time travel gizmo inside of his heart. She threatens to stab it out of his heart, but he points out, if you do that, how do you know you're not just going to break it and be marooned here anyway by yourself? So the pair of them agree to pretty much go on a spaceship and fly further through that space in hopes of surviving the apocalypse. But due to certain circumstances, the pair of them pretty much end up being marooned on the moon again as the whole world comes crashing down around them. They then also discuss the fact that they think that the rich and poshies who have essentially bought the Ark were selfish anyway to try and escape the planet, as they seem to be leaving a billion people behind to wait into devastation and be massacred. Eventually, though, the TVA turn back up and essentially grab Sylvie and Loki, all on the basis of trying to bring them to their court hearing and deciding their further verdict. Before this, of course, though, we get a little glimpse of what caused Sylvie to be captured by the TVA. Turns out that a bunch of toys she had as a kid are classed as, anachronisms. Essentially, it's like giving someone a phone in the Middle Ages. So the TVA jump in, they try and correct this, and Mobius tries to get across to Loki the whole time that the reason that the TVA can't spare his life is on the simple basis that by doing so they would disrupt what they call the natural flow of time. Loki and Sylvie interrupt the monitors who are supposed to have put the timeline together. This is before they know who remains. And essentially they break down the barriers and start cutting off the heads of these supposed lizard gods. When they are revealed to be robots, Mobius starts to change his tune. And suddenly, Judge Rimslayer decides to send Loki and Sylvie to a dimension of junk, where the only thing that waits for them is Goliath. Now, Goliath, for anyone who's recently watched Deadpool and Wolverine or hasn't watched it or was very confused in Deadpool and Wolverine, Goliath is basically this massive monster entity built by He Who Remains to keep people from getting to his kingdom. It's kind of the guard dog. While stranded in this other dimension, Loki comes across other versions of himself, from a crocodile to a lizard to the original version of Loki, which we later go on to find out in the series happened to have tricked the Mad Titan into believing that he was dead. This was all explained by Richard E. Grant's Loki as being a ploy because he felt so bad about taking the Tesseract. So he went off to some dust world, lived there for a while, and eventually the TVA caught up with him, knowing that this is not exactly how the timeline was supposed to go. It's also discussed in this whole Loki story as a whole that Loki could have potentially been DB Cooper. Right, now to wrap up the storyline of essentially what happens in 60 seconds of what happens in Series 1. Series 1, Loki gets captured, then he goes to the end. Then when he gets to this other junk planet and once he gets beyond the guard, him and Sylvie go looking for He Who Remains. Right, that's the kind of rough gist. But let's get more into the ending of this because it carries on into Season 2. Loki and Sylvie are tempted by Miss Minutes to meet He Who Remains. Turns out He Who Remains is this kind of geeky guy who used to be a warrior, a conqueror, a god, and essentially he has trapped himself at the end of time because he has so many variants and each one of them wants to kill him. It's never fully explained why they want to kill him, but it's pretty obvious that He Who Remains is not a very likable guy. Sylvie and Loki begin to fight for what they should do to the guy. If they kill him, they break the natural flow of time. If they let him live, the TVA will continue their work exactly how it is and keep pruning timelines so that nothing is put out of sync. Sylvie decides to pretty much off He Who Remains, and by doing so, she causes a cataclysm which makes the TVA vulnerable to extending timelines and multiverse events. Now let's step over into Season 2. After struggling to find Sylvie after the events of this and trying to figure out exactly what went wrong, when Sylvie returns to the TVA and watches the damage, she decides that she isn't really bothered, and so she goes to live a happy life and work for McDonald's. During this period, Loki keeps trying to reunite members of his group in hopes that they will be able to help him push forward. In one event, he finds another variant of He Who Remains, aka Kang the Conqueror. But this time he finds an inventor from the 1800s who's a little bit ahead of his time with his inventions. After discovering this, Loki tries to help him use a loom and pretty much fix the problem in the TVA. But when going back in time, Loki learns that after all the massacre and after all the problems with the loom and the fact that it doesn't seem to be working, turns out He Who Remains points out to him because the loom won't properly stretch no matter how many decibels they do. The only way to keep it intact is to make a sacrifice. And so, Loki decides at the end of Season 2 to sacrifice himself and create the world tree from within the loom itself. So what did I think of Loki, the series overall? I absolutely love this story, this series and it as a whole. I love all the variants. I love all the multiversal things. It's a shame the whole incident with the actor and Kang, but Kang himself, I feel like, played by a different actor, not trying to be a Thanos or Doctor Doom, could work potentially in the future, even if it's a stand-off side villain who doesn't get as much of a Avengers movie. But as a whole, I feel like Kang the Conqueror could be handled better. What Jonathan Majors tried though wasn't the worst. I definitely feel like where he started to stray towards the end was him trying to be a Thanos. Um, but Tom Hiddleston and everyone else in the cast's performance is absolutely flawless in this series. Miss Minutes, Loki, the Time Variance Authority, and lo and behold, to find out that all the Authority are sort of variants, but real people in the real world who have been dragged away from their lives to work for the TVA, is absolute chef's kiss, pure magic. And for that reason, I give the Loki series a solid 9 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next series review. Until then, goodbye and stay beautiful, you amazing individuals.